Karina went to her fiancé's estate to break off the engagement. When the servant arrived with the news, the Duke was sitting at his desk writing reports. Million was confused because the wedding was scheduled for only 1 year. But Fen asked to meet Karina because she had overcome a difficult path. The main character jumped off the table and ran out, enraged as he left, because Karina didn't even bother to notify him about her visit. Furthermore, his duchy was going through a difficult time. Winter was approaching. There weren't enough supplies, and a confrontation with the demonic beasts was also looming. Standing before the estate gates and opening them, the Duke asked Fen how difficult it would be to break off the engagement. Apparently forgetting the presence of his fiancée on the house porch, Karina heard everything and immediately agreed to end the engagement, which left Million stunned. The main character repeated his offer and set the condition that in return he would provide her accommodation in this castle. The Duke was surprised by her proposal and remained silent for quite some time. Karina took his silence personally and started justifying herself by saying the side wing was enough for her and that she wasn't claiming the entire property. When the protagonist started taking out the engagement-breaking documents from her coat pocket, the Duke noticed that Karina's clothes were very tattered and kept asking her about it. The main character looked at him bewildered, not understanding what he was talking about. But the Duke explained that, judging by her appearance, the duchy was in a rather desperate situation. Having regained her senses, the Duke drew attention to the lack of luggage of his fiancée and clarified her location, to which the main character replied that she was afraid of getting into trouble, and she arrived lightly. Million asked how she got to the estate, to which Karina began to tell the story of her journey, which started with a stagecoach ride. Then she went on foot, and towards the end of the journey, the merchants took her with them. All this took her 2 months. The Duke was shocked by such recklessness, because during all this time, she hadn't even contacted him. And furthermore, she had traveled this entire path alone, violating all rules of decency. Million told all this to Karina, and she replied that this was her first and last journey, that she just wanted to achieve something on her own at least once. The main character asked her what she would do if he denied her accommodation. Karina thought of a backup plan, whose options were returning home or going to run small errands for the merchants. But neither option suited her, and not finding an excuse, she couldn't think of anything better than grabbing her fiancé by the nose. Million was surprised by her action and doubted if she was the one in the engagement, because the lady now in front of him, and the one who was in the engagement, had a very different character. Karina confidently stated that the Duke would not reject her, because she signed the documents to break off the engagement. The Count invited her in, to which Karina gratefully said she would live here as if she weren't there at all. The girl thought to herself that when she disappeared, Million would think she had returned home. Surely then he will heave a sigh of relief, because to the Count she is like an irritating corn on the heel. Million called Fen and ordered him to put Karina in a spare room. At a family dinner, my mother noticed that Lee, the youngest daughter, had a better complexion. Because she was ill, the brother sitting next to her replied that his sister's food was very bitter. In Frigg, the eldest of the brothers, decided to cheer up his sister and bought her a gift. Fell was indignant about this situation because he didn't receive a gift, but in Frigg simply joked about his brother and bought him a gift. Everyone was having fun at the table, the family was communicating, and only Karina felt out of place here. Since childhood, the girl differed from her brothers and sisters, because only her hair was a dull brown color inherited from her great-grandmother or great-grandfather. Getting up from the table, Karina left the dining room, and none of her relatives noticed this action. On the way to her room, Karina felt unwell and ran to the bathroom, where she vomited mercilessly and felt simply disgusting. A few days ago, the main character visited the doctor, and he gave her a diagnosis: an artistic illness, in which all her organs perform at most half of their functions. People with outstanding talents are susceptible to this disease. Sometimes the price of demonstrating talent is vitality, and Karina was among those people. The girl paints beautiful pictures, and each time the condition of her body worsens. And having learned about the illness earlier, she wouldn't have reached this point. This is exactly what the doctor told the girl during the session. Karina tried to tell her family about her illness, but they barely paid attention to her. And they didn't listen to the main character. Her parents always tried to be fair because some were sick, others were young, and needed more care, but Karina was calm and obedient by nature, so she received no more attention than a grain of sand. The girl feared that she would be tormented by doubts about whether her family's feelings were sincere, or if they were simply observing a skill called a miracle. After reading the girl's symptoms, the doctor said she had at most a year left, if not less, but perhaps there was a method to prolong her life, and if Karina was interested, she should come again. The girl, sitting by the window, dreamed of freedom, of checking everything she dreamed of, no longer pretending to be someone she is not, fearing that her family would see her as an unnecessary burden, which would completely ruin Karina. The girl decided to leave home. The protagonist, thinking where to go, thought about what the person who would take her in should be like. Karina dreamed of someone looking at her with clear eyes, loving or hating, and this person was her fiancé, who behaved quite rudely towards her even during the engagement. The girl was sure that Million would not reject her because she would sign the divorce papers, which would save the Count from unnecessary and unwanted trouble. And the girl decided to go north, but first she needed to grab some things. Karina, sitting at her desk, began writing a list of things to take with her on the journey, which included water, jerky, a change of simple clothing, and documents to break off the engagement. She wasn't at breakfast today, and the most annoying thing is that no one noticed. The girl shook her head, trying to ward off unnecessary thoughts, because less than a week remained until departure. And during that time, everything had to be prepared, and when she finished, she stood in front of the mirror and thought. At the reception, two girls called Karina over and asked if she knew Frick. The girls had simply seen them talking. The protagonist replied that she knew him, but the girls had already turned in another direction and began to talk about Karina's family. They spoke about how handsome and power-gifted Frigg was, how active and sociable he is, Ferdin, what a beauty Abelia is, even if she is ill. They also noted that a lady of simple appearance was often near them. They had a hunch that the ugly lady was their recent interlocutor, and they turned back to confirm their conjectures, but there was no trace of Karina anymore. The protagonist was displeased by the words of these two young women, and, returning from her thoughts, examined her reflection. That day, Karina left home early, for which she was scolded. Leaving the estate, on the stairs she ran into Nocton, the doctor who attended Abelia. The girl asked why he was there. Nocton said that Leah underwent a medical examination today, but realizing how she addressed his pupil, the young man felt embarrassed. Karina noticed this reservation and recalled the moment when feelings for this man blossomed in her heart, but she received no answer from him. Abelia took all his attention, and he paid no attention to Karina. Perhaps this is because Lee is very similar to Nocton's sister, who died in early childhood. Returning from her memories to reality, Karina let the young man pass, but Nocton noticed that the girl had an unhealthy complexion, and he offered to examine her immediately after Abelia, but the main character refused the examination, saying that she simply hadn't had enough sleep. Suddenly, a hurricane named Lee flew around the corner and jumped running onto Karina, who was next to Nocton. Abelia immediately hugged the girl by the waist, causing her to almost fly downstairs. But Nocton managed to grab the main character by the waist and commented to the girl that jumping suddenly onto her sister was dangerous, to which the little angel apologized with a smile and said that she really missed her sister. Seeing what her older sister was wearing, Abelia asked where she was going, but Karina gave no clear answer, saying that she needed to go somewhere. Karina let go of her little sister's hands and explained to Leah that it was dangerous to play on the stairs. The girl confidently said that her sister would definitely catch her. By Abelia's words, the protagonist felt sad and a tear welled up in her eyes. Regaining her senses, Karina wiped away a tear and started saying goodbye, but assuring that she was already much better and wanted to play with her older sister. The girl took Karina's hand. Nocton oriented himself in time and, saying that the girl was in a hurry for errands, tried to drag Abelia to her room. Sighing, the girl, envying her sister, said thoughtfully that Karina must be having fun going out. These words were like a blow to the protagonist, because since childhood she had limited herself because of Leah. Abelia was obsessed with the main character, which is why, during her illnesses, it was Karina who stayed with her. The girl was often invited to tea parties, but she was forced to refuse. This led to the fact that Karina did not have a single close friend, and this happened every time. One day, Frick fell off his horse, and his mother left, precisely on the main character's birthday. As she left, she told Karina to take the gift from the butler, and right in front of the girl's face, the doors slammed shut with a roar. There were two cute babies in the crib, and the protagonist looked with delight at her younger children. Mom said that Karina is now an older sister and must take care of her brother and sister. At that moment, the girl was already dreaming about how much fun she would have with the twins. But suddenly little Lee started coughing, which is not typical for babies. Mom, worried, told the maid to call the family doctor. Ferdin, who had already grown up, starts taking Karina's favorite gift, a wallet given to her by her mother. In the heat of the fight, Ferdin fell and burst into tears. Mom burst into the room and started yelling at Karina, telling her that she was an older sister now, and that she should give in, and ordering her to give the little one what he wanted. She punished her so that the protagonist wouldn't set a bad example. Mom picked up Ferdin and asked tenderly where it hurt, while telling Karina not to behave like a child. The girl approached her mother while she was embroidering and told her that her head hurt. Placing her hand on her daughter's hot forehead, the woman said that they were caring for Karina after Abelia, and promised to carry the girl to the room. But suddenly, a servant burst into the room and said that her doctor was asking the countess to come and get Abelia. And leaving her daughter on the floor, the mother rushed out, leaving Karina under the care of the maid. Only when the main character endured obediently was she praised. She always gave way to the sickly Abelia and the troublesome younger brother. And she was inferior to Infrig, who lived far away. The girl was deprived of affection and closed her heart to everyone. But Karina found a new hobby, and creating lively paintings gave her real satisfaction. Her paintings came to life. Seeing this for the first time, Karina ran to her parents to tell them about her talent. But the parents were busy. They received a letter about Infric's victory in the sword competition and rejoiced in his success. The girl showed the picture to her family, but her mother barely glanced at it and returned to the letter. Lost in some of her thoughts, the woman said that the picture was not bad, while she was already preparing a reception for the arrival of her eldest son. Karina felt offended because no one paid attention to her, although her brothers and sisters were not deprived of attention at all. The girl was sitting in her room drawing, but the countess runs in and angrily asks her if she took the object that was on the table. Karina took nothing, but the countess didn't believe her because this thing somehow ended up in Abelia's hands. And this is dangerous, and Karina had to apologize. Infrig had a graduation ceremony, and the father decided to postpone his eldest daughter's birthday party. Abelia got sick, and Karina had to postpone the tea party. And every time, Karina made excuses to her parents, who didn't worry about her. And they obediently nodded, pretending that everything was fine. And faced with the lovelessness of her loved ones, Karina began to seek comfort in paintings. And over time, she realized that the more strength and soul she put into them, the more vivid her paintings would be. It was they who comforted her in difficult times. Returning from her memories, Karina said goodbye to Nocturne and Abelia. To catch up, Leah shouted at her to buy tasty kebab or juice. The girl promised her sister that she would definitely buy something and left the estate. Walking through the garden, Karina thought about how terrible it is to envy her younger sister. The doctor received Karina with a cup of coffee in his hand, and the girl asked him to give her medicine. The doctor asked, bewildered, what kind of medicine we were talking about. Karina said that she had never been the owner of life, but she didn't want this to last until the end of her life and wanted to leave this place. The man asked where she was going, to which he received the answer that Karina was heading north. To center, the doctor shuddered and suggested simply giving her a medicine that kills her instantly, because the road to that county is very dangerous. But Karina asked him to listen to her and said that she needed medicine so as not to fall unconscious on the way. After thinking about it, the doctor promised to manufacture a medicine that would slow down the illness for exactly 2 months, in exactly 6 days. In gratitude, the girl poured a handful of gold coins onto the man's desk. He noticed that this was too much, but Karina replied that she still had nowhere to spend it. The door slammed shut behind Karina, and the man wondered, bewildered, what kind of life she would live if she was willing to give up so easily. And at the same time, she seemed careless. The main character was walking through the market and smelled the delicious smell of meat nearby. There was a tent with delicious kebab. Remembering the promise she made to Abelia, Karina bought 2 skewers with kebab. After collecting the purchased gift, the girl boarded the stagecoach and went home. On the way to the estate, Karina was thoughtful and reconsidered her parents' words that Abelia and Ferdin were small, so she should understand and yield. Suddenly, Fen jumped from the curve, ran towards Karina, smelled the bag of kebab. and snatched it from the girl's hands. Karina, without resisting, gave the kebab to the boy and told him she had just bought it at Abelia's request, so he could serve himself. Delighted, Ferdin ran up the stairs to Leah's room to share the delicious delicacy. Karina realized she was tired that day and went to her room to close her eyes for a while. The girl woke up at night when someone called her name furiously. Bewildered, Karina stared at her father, who was casting thunder and lightning with his gaze. The main character sat on the edge of the bed and asked what they were doing in her room. Noticing that her mother and Fen were standing in the half-open doorway, the Count asked her if she brought street food for Abelia, and smiling maliciously, told her not to say anything, as if she didn't know that Abelia couldn't be fed anything. Karina realized with sadness that for many years they had come to her room not to see how she was, but to blame her again for all the problems happening on the estate. The girl asked what had happened, but the Count said that food was not suitable for Leah, and she vomited, causing dehydration to begin. Then the Countess, adding fuel to the fire, said that Karina had acted irresponsibly, and the girl cried out desperately that she had simply fulfilled her sister's request. Her father shouted at her not to make excuses. Karina tried to calm down, to justify her actions, because they are worried about Abelia, so they look for someone to blame, but for some reason she is always the culprit. The girl was tired of all this, and she, straightening up and staring fixedly into her father's eyes, asked him what the problem was. What did they want from her? The Count was bewildered by such a change and asked what she was saying. Karina repeated her question and said they should have educational conversations with Abelia and explain to her what she can and cannot do. The Count began to scold the girl for not worrying about her sister's health, and the Countess indignantly asked what tone she was using with her father. Karina was getting worse by the moment and promised to be more alert next time, and ordered her father to carefully look after Abelia. The Count took her words into account and left the eldest daughter's room, but turning around, he reminded Karina that Abelia had been sick since childhood. Unlike her, an absolutely healthy girl. For the protagonist, these words were very unpleasant, and she still couldn't understand. If she wasn't the only healthy one in the family, why did she exclusively have to sacrifice herself? Entering the room, my mother asked me to treat my father with understanding, because he was worried that Leah had lost consciousness. The parents turned around and were about to leave the room, but were caught by Karina's question if they had forgotten something. Turning around, the father asked what she meant. Karina asked to convey to Lely her regret for what happened. The door closed behind her parents, and the girl threw herself face down on the pillow, remembering that she too had recently experienced symptoms of dehydration. Karina jumped out of bed and rushed to draw her new creation to relieve her soul. With every stroke, the girl felt better, distracted from the pressing problems. A beautiful fairy, short in stature, with a beautiful flower dress, flew out of the picture. Karina firmly decided that she would never give up her creations, even if they took her life. 2 days later, the girl left her room for the dining room for the first time. Abelia and Ferdin flew out from behind the door and apologized for that night. Karina crossed the dining room doors for the last time to have breakfast with her family. At the table, the topic of Karina's birthday came up, which she had forgotten, and the father suggested postponing the holiday and having a family picnic, as in Frick had vacation at that time. Karina didn't mind, but said she wouldn't be able to attend the picnic as she had something to do, to which the Count was indignant, because this matter is really so urgent that she won't be able to spend time with her family. The young woman confirmed that the matter was urgent and, getting up from the table, finished her meal. Karina ran to the hallway, left her letter of farewell, and thought with resentment why even the last memories of her family would still be terrible. Putting on a cloak, the main character left the family estate, leaving only one letter and just one line. While bathing in the bathroom, Karina thought about how good it was that Million didn't kick her out onto the street. Since the girl has 3 pills of her medication left on the doctor's recommendation, she stops taking them starting today, which risks having a fever, weakness, and then her condition will worsen. Karina dried herself with a towel and believed that she would feel worse that night. The girl really liked her independent life, and for this she is ready to do anything. The main character entered the Duke's office. He told her to sit down, and the real interrogation began. He asked Karina why she came to the estate. Was it because of a fight with her family, or were there other reasons? And the main character had to answer him if she wanted to stay in his house. The girl didn't want to tell him, but Million gave her no other choice. The Duke was surprisingly intelligent and drew the correct conclusions about her stay on the estate. Million suggested that Karina left due to a fight with her family. He was right. And no, the main character wanted to spend her last months in a quiet place. She sadly recalled how she thought that, with her death, everyone would regret how they behaved towards Karina. But these were childish and naive thoughts that were not destined to come true. The Duke said that winter would come soon, and he wouldn't have time to worry about her. The girl was incredibly happy with this news, which left Million stunned. Karina noticed that she especially needed to move to the dependency so as not to attract his attention again. But Million said that the dependency needed cleaning, that it was necessary to move the necessary things there, and assign servants. The girl was not afraid of this, and, with the permission of the owner of the house, went to rest in her new quarters. At the door, Karina turned around. She apologized for her stubbornness and left the office. Going up the stairs, the main character felt worse and worse. Karina could not sleep. She tossed and turned in bed. She was trembling terribly. Looking at the fireplace, she saw that it was not burning, so she got up to get a pitcher of water and a towel while she could still move. The corridor of the estate was dark and silent. This aggravated the situation and caused uncontrollable fear. Therefore, when she was called from the corridor, the girl indiscriminately began to wave the lantern to catch the attacker. But upon seeing whom she almost hit, Karina stopped and asked bewildered what the Duke was doing in the dark corridor. Million didn't know what to answer to this, not to mention that he was brought here by the feet, because he was worried. But still, he said that the temperature regulator in the dependency was broken, and he decided to check it. Million also wanted to say something else while trying to touch Karina, but she moved away from him. The Duke, bewildered, asked the girl what she was hiding and if she had problems. But Karina, dragging her foot, said that nothing bothered her. The Duke realized that the matter was dirty and, grabbing the main character's hand, dragged her to the window. In the moonlight, Million saw that the girl's cheeks were burning. She had difficulty breathing, and immediately realized that she had a fever. The Duke began to blame himself because Karina was probably tired from the long journey, and he didn't realize immediately that he should first offer the girl to rest. Karina began to deny it, saying that if she rested she would feel better. The man told the girl that there was no need to be a hero, and that she needed to talk about everything honestly. And waving his hand in front of Karina's eyes, he asked how many fingers she could see. The main character still did not want to admit her illness and tried to guess the number of fingers. But when you have 3 in front of your eyes, this is not an easy task. And after thinking, the girl answered the number 3, which was the wrong answer. Saying that Karina was nothing more than a problem, Million took her in his arms and dragged her to the room. Since the dependency is a bad place for a sick person, the man took her to the main wing of the house. The protagonist asked her fiancé not to call the doctor because she just needed to rest. The Duke agreed with the girl's arguments and continued on his way. After putting Karina to bed, Million stayed to take care of her. A maid runs into the dining room and reports that Karina has disappeared and shows him a letter she found while cleaning. The Count, unfolding the letter, frowned, and the Countess asked what confused him about this letter. After reading, the mother was shocked because her eldest daughter left on a trip without even saying a word to anyone. The Count asked the maid when she last saw Karina, to which she paused thoughtfully, and said that the last time she saw her was 2 days ago, when she was out on business, and he asked his children the same question. The younger ones said they hadn't seen her in the last few days and thought she was walking around the market. And Ferdinand suggested that maybe his sister was offended, since her birthday and the picnic overlapped. The Countess complained that Karina had left some paper, knowing very well that they would worry. And if she didn't want to go to the picnic, she could have just said so. The father, calming her down, told her that Karina couldn't have gone far and ordered the servant to send people to find out where she had gone. He also learned from the maid that 2 gold pieces were missing, from which he concluded that with that amount of money, she couldn't get far. She will last 2 weeks, and when she arrives, he will scold her as he should. The mother began to worry that something bad might happen, and the Count clicked his tongue and said how shameless she was, repaying her parents with black ingratitude. After receiving the first report about Karina from his men, the Count became furious, and, complaining about the childish behavior, said that this was too much. The Countess, entering the office, asked what had happened, to which she was informed that her eldest daughter had left the southern lands. The mother was shocked by such news and asked where Karina was now, but the head of the family could not give an exact answer, as her trail ended at the entrance to the capital. The mother began to worry because she was in trouble and demanded that people be sent to bring Karina back. The count said there was no point in forcibly returning the girl to the estate if she was tired of her home. Let her do what she wanted, but she could only cross the threshold of the house when she bowed her head and asked for forgiveness. And ordering the servant to continue the search, the count turned his attention to his wife, and he began to justify Karina because she was simply upset and he shouldn't be so angry with her. But Cassis pushed his wife away so that she wouldn't defend her eldest daughter, who in her right mind runs away from home because a birthday party was postponed. The man asked about Abelia's well-being as she fell asleep and woke up with Karina's name on her lips. She felt lonely. The countess said that the girl constantly looks sadly at Karina's room and noted that she is better than her thoughtless sister. The count asked, bewildered, what Karina was deprived of, since she had everything she could wish for. The countess agreed that the girl had nothing to complain about, but at the same time, she behaved like a capricious child. Upon waking up, the protagonist saw the Duke by her bed. She asked, bewildered, what he was doing here. Million replied that he was watching her because the girl refused to be examined by a doctor. Karina asked shamefully if she was bothering him, but the Duke thought about how caring for a sick person could interfere. But he said something completely different. He is the owner, she is the guest, and he is obliged to take care of the girl. He also asked what the girl needed, only that the Duke had never cared about anyone. Karina didn't believe that this was the first time he was taking care of a sick person, but Million confirmed that it was the first time he had such an experience. The girl noticed that it is nice when someone takes care of you, and she often took care of her sisters and sick brothers. The Duke realized that he was referring to the fact that no one sat with her, and he remembered that in many families where there are sick children, difficult relationships develop, and they receive all the attention and love. Million said the fever wasn't going down, and Karina asked him to bring medicine from her bag. What did she forget to bring? The man got up to follow her, but the girl stopped him and asked him to stay. The Duke said she had a high fever and needed medicine, but Karina insisted on her own. In the end, Million gave up, sat down by the bed and asked to sleep a little longer, assuring the girl that he won't leave and will be there. Once calmed down, Karina relaxed and fell asleep with a slight smile on her lips. The man decided that he would keep the girl for the next 4 months. In the morning, the Duke looked at Karina and reproached her that her fever had just gone down, and she had already gotten out of bed. The protagonist, in her defense, said that throughout that week she was bored in bed, and she wanted to relax. The man approached the girl and, out of habit, put his hand on her forehead to check her temperature. Karina flinched and frowned at this. Million confirmed that the temperature has dropped, but he doesn't understand anything. Why does the main character act like a frightened rabbit? Smiling, with devils in the corner of his eye, he asked the girl if she was afraid he would eat her. At this, the girl frowned even more, but the Duke changed the subject and suggested having lunch together. Walking to the dining room, the man said that Karina did not need to return to the dependency, since he was often away due to trips with demonic beasts. Karina also wanted to go on an excursion and asked if he could take her with him, to which she received a categorical refusal. Not very upset, the girl continued on her way. They had almost arrived, but Million asked her if the girl liked to draw. Otherwise, he saw drawing supplies in her bag. The main character confirmed his assumption, and, with feigned indifference, Million invited her to climb onto the roof at sunset or sunrise. Pulling the girl towards him, the Duke said that in return, she would be careful climbing onto the roof. She will dress warmly before going there, notify him or Fen, and also come down every hour to warm up. Karina at that moment thought that he was too demanding, and perhaps that is why she was not liked by the servants. Well, the Duke continued his instructions and called her dried squid, as during the engagement. Because of that nickname, the girl frowned and looked confusedly at her fiancé, who tried to explain to Karina what she looked like at the ceremony. Firstly, she was standing next to the servants, as if tied up, and secondly, on her face it was written that she had been dragged by force. Million reproached the girl that if she didn't want to get married, she could simply say so. But Karina wanted to explain that her parents arranged the marriage without asking for consent. At the same time, they did not show up for the ceremony due to another seizure of Abelia, but instead, he apologized for his inappropriate behavior. Million also confessed that he should have asked for her opinion before fulfilling the will of his late predecessor. He also asked to speak directly if Karina doesn't like something. The Duke led the girl to the dining room door and asked what kind of food she preferred. Karina said she did not eat fatty foods. The man took his fiancée to an extraordinary place, a glass dome with different types of flowers, and decorated with golden monograms. Million also pointed out that during snowfalls, this dome offers a magical view. Karina asked when it would snow, and the Duke, after thinking, replied that at the beginning of next month. Captivated by the sight of the beauties, the girl completely forgot about the food. The Count reminded her of the food, with a knowing smile on his lips. Million ordered the servants to place all the low-fat food on the girl's side, and the meal began. The main character did not expect such care from a man and felt a little uncomfortable. The Duke noticed his companion wasn't eating and asked what was wrong, Karina. As always, he started the sentence with the words, "Your Grace," but the man interrupted her and told her to simply call him Lion. The girl was a little surprised, but gathering courage, she apologized for all the trouble the Duke had to go through, and also expressed her fears that he would refuse to accept her. Million confirmed that he would have rejected her, but only because it was dangerous to be in the north in winter, and he apologized for the rude words spoken during the girl's arrival. Karina wanted to talk more about the art sickness, but changed her mind and decided she needed to leave the duchy. And wishing her bon appetit, the protagonist continued eating. After dinner, the man asked if she liked everything, to which Karina replied affirmatively, and she headed to her room. Standing by the window, the protagonist digested the pleasant emotions received during lunch and decided to go up to the roof tomorrow at dawn. The estate shuddered from the owner's indignant shouts, and Karina was sitting on the bed, wrapped in a warm blanket, and the Duke couldn't understand why the girl went up to the roof with only a cloak, without notifying anyone, and she hadn't come down yet to warm up. The protagonist tried to explain that she didn't want to wake anyone and decided to watch the sunrise with one eye. But right after seeing this splendor, she couldn't leave without finishing the landscape. She just needed to finish painting a little bit. But the Duke who appeared on the roof was a complete surprise for Karina, and the way he carried her to the room completely amazed the girl. Million was indignant at how careless she could be with her health, and Karina, looking at him, smiled stupidly, happy about so much care. Having cooled down a bit, the Duke joked that he could turn into a living heater, and that they could save money on fuel, although the girl did not understand the humor, and she offered the man a blanket. A whole hour has passed, while Karina sits wrapped in a blanket. Seeing the package in the girl's hand, Million asked for permission to look at her painting. The protagonist, embarrassed, said that it was nothing special, but she agreed to the job. Karina expected anything from him, but not that upon looking at her work, he would realize that excessive modesty is also bad. The Duke also said that he was not an expert in this field and could not appreciate the work. The man was impressed with her drawing and advised Karina to have more confidence in herself, and in the end, he added that he eagerly awaited the finished version. The main character thanked him for the compliments and said she was very happy, but Million replied that there wasn't a drop of flattery in his words, and that if he hadn't seen any potential, he would have advised her to look for another occupation. The man asked for the finished work to be handed over because he wants to gift the drawing to his friend, so he can appreciate the painting. Karina agreed, but asked to refrain from notes, as this is not why she draws. The girl wanted to ask the Duke for permission to get out of the blanket cocoon, but someone unexpectedly knocked on the door. A certain Maria came and joked from the door saying that Million didn't know how to dress the girl, and wrapped her in a pile of blankets. The Duke ordered her to stop joking and asked to examine the protagonist, explaining the essence of her ailments. As soon as Karina realized that her fiancé had brought the doctor, she immediately hid under the blankets. The doctor was confused by this, and Million directly asked what was wrong. The girl mumbled in response that she had asked not to call the doctor. The man, indignant, stated that she herself with her behavior forced him to call him, and, grabbing Karina by the armpit, he carried her to the bed. This scene plunged Maria into indescribable horror, because noble ladies should not be treated this way. As she told Million, the doctor rushed to the couple and began to lecture the Duke, like a careless student, that Southerners would not tolerate the same rude treatment as Northerners. Maria apologized to the young woman for her lord's behavior and asked her to extend her hand. Karina agreed to the request, but was very tired. She was sleepy, and the doctor convinced the girl to lie down, covering her with a blanket. Maria continued the examination and became gloomier with every passing moment. Million asked what was wrong, The doctor said that the protagonist is very unwell. Her pulse is unstable and weak. Her heartbeats are distant and vague. Maria said that this illness is rare, but it seems Karina has an artistic illness. The Duke did not understand the diagnosis, and the young man tried to explain it to him. The Io's empire received the blessing of art, as the North was captured relatively recently. Now it has more military men, but the South is full of famous artists. Millions suggested that his friend Ferial's music had a healing effect, and that was his miracle. Maria confirmed the Duke's assumptions and said that Karina has the power to perform similar miracles, as indicated by the bruises on the inside of her arm. Lost in his thoughts, Million noticed that even he, a man who didn't think about art, was trembling at the sight of the girl's drawing. The familiar landscape had never seemed so beautiful to him. The man asked how serious her condition was, but Maria could not give an exact answer. Since there are 3 types of illnesses, he could not determine it. The first is when the symptoms of the illness are loss of strength. The second is when the limbs or sensory organs fail. And the third is rare and almost never encountered, when strength requires vital energy as payment. Million asked Maria if the girl would die in the worst case, to which the doctor replied affirmatively. The man concluded that he could only wait and watch as his fiancée lost her limbs, or died, but he did not like this situation. Maria said that to save her life she had to give up art, but most likely she wouldn't. The Duke could not understand how art could be more valuable than life. Why not give it up? The doctor explained it using the example of the Duke himself. If he were in mortal danger, or of losing a limb, he would have given up the sword. Million agreed with the arguments, and Maria added that all those who have fallen ill with the art sickness value their gift too much to simply abandon it. The Duke reflected that during the engagement, there was no talk of illness. The man, looking at Karina, thought that she had probably dedicated most of her life to art. Million sent the doctor away and promised to send a note to Ferial. Maria advised being careful with the girl, and, leaving the antipyretic, left Karina's bedroom. The Duke courted his fiancée until nightfall. He went out onto the balcony, lit a cigar, and thought. Recalling the engagement, the man noticed that Karina was almost crying, and constantly cast a sad look at the place where the duchy's heiress was sitting, and her younger brother. Every time someone approached to congratulate them, she forced a smile. These forced smiles irritated him, and the Duke called Karina calamari to annoy her. Million whistled, and crossing the night sky, a finch appeared. It sat on the man's hand, tied a letter to it, and sent it to its destination. Looking at the flying bird, the Duke prayed that Ferial's reply would arrive before the cold set in. Noctin accompanied his master to the north, and could not understand why he was going there. The doctor gave the final instructions and loaded the luggage onto the stagecoach, but the master still decided to share with Noctin the reason for his departure, and told him that about a month ago, a girl approached him who had little time left due to an artistic illness and told him she was going north, but that there were no doctors there who understood this illness, and the man decided to follow the patient. The doctor left Noctin in charge of the clinic and advised him to be impartial towards patients. This patient, to which the teacher replied that she introduced herself as Rena, and boarding the stagecoach, she left. Infric asked his father about Karina, but the count said there was no news, and that her trail was lost in the capital. But the search continues. The worried brother suggested involving soldiers in the search, but the father is categorically against it, because if his soldiers are found inside the capital, misunderstandings may arise from the emperor. But Infric still felt uneasy. Something might happen to Karina. The count examined the family portraits on his desk and was surprised by the absence of a portrait of his eldest daughter. The man walked to Karina's room, which was located at the end of the corridor. When she was little, the daughter complained to her father that the room was too scary, and it was far from the stairs. So, the head of the family considered it a whim and scolded the girl. But now, recalling this moment, he understands that she might have been truly scared. The count opened the door to Karina's room and noticed that it was a bit cramped for an adult girl. The man pulled out a drawer from the desk and saw a large number of drawings. One of them seemed familiar. The family went for a walk to this place when Abelia was feeling well. Then the man did not notice Karina's absence and was extremely surprised by this fact. The countess unexpectedly entered the room and was surprised by her husband's presence in it. The mother said she couldn't calm down because Karina was leaving and decided to enter her room. Although it seemed unfamiliar to the countess, seeing the sheet in the man's hands, she asked what it was, to which the Count told her it was a drawing by Karina. The woman noted that her eldest daughter hadn't brought her drawings in a long time. Previously, when she was a child, she brought her work to show off, but apparently at some point she became shy and stopped doing it. The mother said that Lee kept wondering when her sister would return, and Ferdinand was eager to go look for her, and advised her husband to send a telegram to Duke Festelio, to which the man said that the road to the north was dangerous, and Karina would not dare to make such a journey, especially with the small amount of money she carried with her. Looking at the drawing, the woman could not understand one thing. Why? Looking at this drawing, it seemed that Karina felt lonely. Noctin noticed that Abelia was sad and asked what was wrong, and the girl said that 2 months had already passed since Karina left home. Then, unexpectedly, the young man had a hunch perhaps Karina Leopold was the patient the teacher told him about. Lee also shared that during her illnesses, Karina was always with her, and even without friends, the girl did not feel lonely. And her sister refused to meet with friends when Abelia asked her to stay. Noctin thought that perhaps Karina did not love Lee as much as he thought. He remembered the moment on the stairs when his sister jumped on the girl and told her that she thought she would catch her. Then Karina fell silent, barely audibly telling the girl not to believe her. And these words were so sincere that one wonders if all her affection was feigned. Coming out of his thoughts, Noctin advised Abelia not to worry, to recover soon, and go look for Karina. The girl agreed and suddenly remembered that she had recently learned that her sister had a talent. Lee crawled under the bed and pulled out a drawing which she showed to Nocturne. The young man was amazed by this work. The image was so realistic that it seemed as if he were looking through a real window. Abelia said that if she were in her sister's place, she would immediately run to boast to her mother. This image only confirmed Nocturne's suspicions, who said goodbye and left the girl's room. Slamming the door, the young man took out a medical card from his suitcase, which turned out to be Karina's, and he read the teacher's bewildering conclusions. Karina woke up in the middle of the night because her throat was dry. The girls saw a cup and a teapot on the nightstand near the bed, which were not there before. Apparently, the Duke decided to take care of her. Curled up in bed, Karina once again regretted coming to the duchy. When the protagonist was informed of her imminent death, the first thing she thought of was the family's attitude. That would start to change over time. Upon learning of the illness, they would have given the girl the long-awaited attention and warmth. But Karina did not want to realize that she would receive the attention she desired only before dying. It was for these reasons that the girl fled further north. After all, at the ceremony, millions seemed to hate Karina, and if she came to the duchy, he would ignore her. She was going to live as if she didn't exist at all. But the protagonist does not understand why an almost stranger takes care of her 100 times more than her own family. The girl did not want the man to feel guilty about her death, remembering that she had recently read about an amulet that erases memories. Karina decided to draw it. After all, thanks to her skill, it was possible to recreate any object she drew if the girl had ever seen it or felt. She could even briefly resurrect a person in exchange for her own death. And if the main character were born into a family with a deep history of art, she would spare nothing. But now there is no point in blaming the family for everything. And the girl decided to leave the estate, but she still cannot decide where. Suddenly, Million entered the room and made sure Karina had already woken up. And sitting next to her, he asks what kind of artistic illness she suffers from. The girl did not understand the question and asked to be explained what he meant. The man told her Maria's words that she suffered from the art sickness. He said it is divided into 3 types and asked again what type Karina has. The main character, instead of answering the question, began to apologize for her selfish behavior. The Duke realized that the conversation was not going well, but the girl made a global mistake and suggested pretending that nothing had happened. With this proposal, she angered Million, but composing himself, he asked her if it was really so difficult for her to answer the question. Karina, as if she hadn't heard her fiancé, asked if she could move to the dependencies and promised that she would no longer bother the Duke. Million bitterly reproached her that she had just recovered and had already asked to go to the dependency, and directly asked the girl if she would become paralyzed or die, and also what she was going to do, because in the north there were no doctors who could cure her. Karina, turning her head, asked the Duke to forget about the doctors, as they were powerless. But Million explained that one only has to give up art, and then the illness will disappear. But the girl said she couldn't give up art, as there was nothing else in her life. The paintings were her only friends. The Duke asked her if she had really come here to clear her head. But I realized that Karina wouldn't answer this question either, and he told the girl that he had a lot of patience with her. Once a decision was made, Karina said the story would be prolonged, but Million just got more comfortable and prepared to listen to the main character. Karina thought for a long time where to start, and Million called her so she wouldn't forget where she was. The girl began the story by saying that, a week later, when she found out she was sick, she went north. She explained that she wanted to be in a quiet place and sort out her thoughts, as it was unbearable for her to be near her family. The Duke asked how it was unbearable, to which the girl gave the example of when her birthday coincided with Infric's graduation ceremony, so she had to celebrate alone, or when she was forced to borrow a wallet that she loved so much and which her mother gave her for her birthday. Furthermore, the younger sister was praised for every little detail, while Karina was ignored despite her efforts. The main character did not want to live through the experience again and ran away from home. Karina said this was very childish, but Million denied her words. After all, she always gave in to her brothers and sister and did not interrupt their vacations or misbehave. Falling to the ground, she gave an example of childish behavior from her own life, when she accidentally spilled water on her father's documents and ran away from home for fear of punishment. Million also said that Karina's behavior was far from childish. Since she constantly gave in, she was not obliged to do so. The girl said that giving in to her family was natural. The man asked her why she decided to do this. Karina realized the fallacy of the opinion instilled in her since childhood, and she became very upset. The Duke pulled her towards him and suggested that she cry to make it easier. The girl looked at her fiancé bewilderedly. Million suggested that they cry first and then finish their story. Karina nodded and, burying her nose in the man's shirt, began to sob. After crying, the protagonist tried to remember the last time she cried in front of someone. Karina turned to Million and saw the stain she had left on his shirt, and apologizing, she tried to clean it. The Duke reproachfully smiled that at such a moment it was better to thank him for being there. Stuttering, the girl thanked her fiancé for his support, and Million asked her not to say the words, "I'm sorry and everything is fine," so simply. Because if you use these words constantly, belittling yourself, the other person will get used to it. They will stop taking the words seriously, but words of gratitude are always nice for both. Karina looked at the man in shock because she had never thought of anything like that. She constantly said the words, "I was wrong to avoid the situation." And gradually, these words lost their color and became useless. The girl thanked Million again and asked to call her Rena. The man agreed and, after saying goodbye, went out the door. Fen met him there and told him that a letter from Ferial had arrived. The Duke was surprised by such a quick response. Taking the letter, the man began to read the response, but there was nothing good there. Ferial refused to help Karina with a miracle, and judging by the letter, he won't arrive soon. Wrinkling the letter, Million asked Fen to find out where women like to go. The doctor passed the checkpoint towards the north. The coachman noticed that the man was lucky, as it was a great success to pass it at the beginning of winter, and he asked why he was embroidering a drawing on the fabric, to which the doctor replied very mysteriously that he needed to find someone. Karina was standing near the window at dawn. The Duke was training outside at that moment, and she drew him. It became her new hobby. He, so different from her, seemed to the girl like a bright sun. Every time, upon seeing Million, Karina felt invaded by inspiration. Suddenly, this same man entered her room. Karina indignantly noticed that he had to knock before entering someone else's room. The Duke, for the record, said he knocked up to 5 times, but she didn't hear him. Million was curious to know what she was doing and was so engrossed. The man snatched the drawing from the girl's hands and, amidst shouts of protest, began to look at it. It became clear to him why she wakes up so late. It turns out she draws at dawn. The main character started making excuses, saying that when the Duke brandishes his sword under the dark sky, he looks extraordinary. Regaining her senses, Karina asked him why he had come. Million said that he would soon leave for an inspection and that he wanted to take her with him. The man was standing near the carriage when the main character called him. Karina dressed very beautifully and left an indelible impression with her beauty. The Duke offered the girl his hand to get into the vehicle and climbed in after her. The servants accompanying them wished Million to be careful. In the carriage, the man noticed that Karina acted too modestly for a noblewoman. He asked the girl who taught her etiquette. The main character replied that the Viscountess taught her like her parents taught her brother. And her sister, Million, asked why they didn't work with her. Karina tried to justify them and said that at that time her sister was very sick, and her parents couldn't devote much time to the main character. The Duke realized that it would be rude to keep asking and switched to another topic by asking why the girl took the notebook. Karina said she wanted to write wishes there, but nothing came to mind. Million advised writing something simple and not demanding too much of herself. The carriage stopped. The Duke got out, offered his hand, and told the girl not to underestimate her importance when remembering the county. The county took care of a tree that should have been transplanted from a small pot. The tree couldn't do anything and continued to grow until one day it couldn't take it anymore, and it escaped the pot over its roots. Karina found this speech funny because she imagined a tree running away by its roots. The Duke said he was serious and that there was nothing funny about it. There are many people, both adults and parents, everyone is busy with something. Karina and Million came to the Festival of Abundance. The girl didn't understand if there really was an abundance of food in the north in winter, and she asked the Duke. The man said that in winter, they eat meat to their heart's content and noticed that the main character was thinking. Karina asked what meat they had in abundance. Her fiancé replied that it was the meat of demonic beasts. After all, hungry demonic beasts descend into the city, destroy it, and eat them. The skin and bones of the monsters also make good jewelry. Million asked the girl what she wanted, and Karina ran to choose something quickly, almost bumping into one of the merchants. But the Duke managed to intercept her. Suddenly, the ringing of a bell sounded throughout the square. This meant that a demonic beast had appeared nearby, and Million decided to check what had happened. The soldier greeted the man. The Duke asked what the situation was, and they told him that the advance group was now holding back the monsters. Million asked the girl to stay in the tower, and he jumped out of the window and ordered the soldiers to protect the lady. Karina watched as her fiancé began to fight the beast, and the soldiers told her that this beast had appeared recently and was so strong that they couldn't even scratch it. The girl decided to help the Duke in something. The girl took a sheet of paper and a pencil and began to draw. The demonic beast left. The main character ran towards her fiancé. When I ran, I saw that there was blood on Million's face. Seeing the girl, the Duke started scolding her because he himself could have approached her. But Karina, without saying a word, pressed a clean handkerchief to her fiancé's temple. But pushing her hand away, the man said he was fine. Million noticed that the girl's hands were icy cold, and rummaging in his pockets, he took out a pendant that he said he would accept as a gift. Seeing this, the soldiers shouted in unison, "It's impossible," to which the Duke ordered them to run 100 laps around the drill ground. Karina, after examining the pendant, was surprised to see a stone on it, but the man explained that it was a caront, a rare object that appears when a demonic beast is defeated. And the belief of the North says that a person with poor health will get better if they carry it with them. Smiling, Million wished her a speedy recovery. The girl thanked him for such a valuable gift. The couple returned to the carriage, but suddenly a whirlwind rushed past them. It turned out to be a doctor, and after greeting him, he noticed that Karina's complexion had improved. The main character was very surprised by the appearance of the doctor in the north, and asked how he got here. And the man replied mysteriously again that he had his own methods, and asked who was next to the girl. The Duke introduced himself and offered his hand to shake it. The doctor understood why Karina's name seemed familiar, as she was the same girl engaged to the Archduke. Million realized that the conversation would be long, and suggested going to the estate. Ferial was traveling to the Leopold family estate. The head of the family met a young man. Carlos thanked the Leopoldo family for taking the time to receive him in their castle, and immediately got down to business, asking where the drawings he requested were. The Count said they were already prepared, and asked what Ferial needed them for. The young man remembered receiving a letter from Million while eating. Then, a painfully familiar falcon flew into his dining room, with a package in its talons, in which the Duke asked to determine the type of Karina's illness from her drawings. Taking the eldest daughter's drawings from the servant, the Count began to review them, and said that Ferial was unlikely to like such mediocre works. But the young man noticed that Cassis should learn to properly evaluate works of art, and added that it was funny to hear such things from a person who does not understand the artistic craft. The Count was stunned by the Duke's behavior and said that, although he has no idea why Ferial needed to see Karina's drawings, he behaves scandalously. The young man thought sadly that this was what he was saying to a man who so carelessly preserves his works of art. The Duke had long since learned that among those suffering from the art sickness, with rare exceptions, there are people who have good relations with their families. He has repeatedly met those who deliberately concealed the illness. But in this case, the relationship was so bad that the girl kept silent about the art itself. With a relaxed smile, Ferial asked the Duke if he knew that his daughter suffered from the art sickness. The man didn't believe him and said that Karina wasn't that talented, and how could she escape if she were really sick? The Duke asked with a smile if the trip to the fiancé was considered running away from home, and added that it was Duke Festelio who sent him here. The father was shocked by the news that his eldest daughter was in the north. The Duke said he had no idea where Karina was. He clarified if the Count really considered his daughter healthy, and complained with feigned regret that his dear friend had deceived him. Of such impudence, Cassis jumped up and told Ferial to leave if he was done. The young man said he had learned everything he needed, and then said goodbye. Cassis thanked the Duke for informing him of Karina's whereabouts, and said he would definitely thank him properly. Ferial casually noticed that the Count did not believe in his daughter's illness, but easily believed that she was in the north, and in the end, added that if he were in his place, if a young man were told that his child was sick, he would first ask what kind of illness it is and how she feels. After saying goodbye, Ferial left the Count's office. During his stay at the estate, the Duke noticed that in most of the works, the subject of the image had disappeared, leaving only paper. This means that this is a miracle of creation, and it might already be too late. After the conversation with Ferial, the Count sat at his desk and digested the information he had heard. After calling, Noctin and Infric entered the office. Cassis asked how Abelia was. The doctor said that the girl was losing strength, but her general condition was normal. The Count was glad to hear such news, but after 2 months, Dahlia also fell ill, Cassis's wife, and he did not forget to ask about her condition. The young man said that she had accumulated fatigue, but if she took pills and rested enough, she would recover quickly. Noctin said goodbye and left, but near the door he wondered if he should tell the Count about Karina's illness. But he changed his mind, because if Leah found out, her condition would worsen. Cassis asked his son if he had seen Duke Carlos's carriage. Infric responded with a positive nod and asked what he was doing there. The Count said that Ferial told him about Karina's presence in Infric's duchy. He was stunned by such an answer and demanded that they proceed immediately. But the man tried to reason with his son, because now they won't be able to reach the north. Since the checkpoint is closed, the Count asked his eldest son what Duke Festelio seemed like to him when he, instead of his father, she went to Karina's engagement party. Infric said that rumors don't lie, and that there is nothing to complain about the Duke. During the engagement party, he took good care of Karina, and it seems that Karina likes Million too. He almost wondered if he was so dear to her that she even left home to visit the Duke. The Count found this reason for running away plausible, and, laughing, observed that it was childish, because they weren't married yet. Besides, why worry if she didn't even send a single letter, showing disrespect towards her parents? Karina, sitting across from the doctor, asked him how he had found her. The man said he used the power of a miracle. Maybe it's not noticeable at first glance, but he is good at embroidery. The girl was shocked by the product, but Million did not succumb to the magic of the moment, and asked how the doctor uses embroidery. The man explained that he could find anything, and anyone just by thinking about the item while burning his own embroidery, and finds out where such and such a thing is. When the man was young, he used this skill to help the guards catch criminals. Now he suffers from the art sickness, too. He is not very lucky, and is gradually losing his sight. Karina asked in shock if he was really blind. The doctor said, laughing, that he had almost lost his sight, but he still saw something, because he was able to reach the north safe and sound. The Duke clarified that the illness was curable. The man replied sadly that there is no cure for the art sickness. He simply stopped embroidering. This is the only treatment. Not all people are susceptible to the art sicknesses. Among artists, the incidence rate is 1%, but the loss of senses like vision is not a rare symptom. Very rarely, in exchange for a miracle, the illness claims a life. It is estimated that this is approximately 1 person every 50 or 60 years. Therefore, the probability of death is low. The man asked Karina for permission to ask her a couple of questions. The girl agreed, but only in her room. The Duke was a little angry and annoyed by so much mistrust on the girl's part. The carriage arrived, and Karina, thanking the man for the ride, went out into the street. But turning back, she added that she wouldn't mind repeating that trip again. And she went to her room, accompanied by the doctor. While walking down the hall, the man asked Karina if the Duke knew that she would die soon. The main character said that now is not the right situation to say this. Karina wants to stay in the duchy a little longer, and then escape quietly so as not to hurt Million. Sitting in the girl's room, the doctor said that everything was fine, that the stage of her illness was much more important, and asked if the Count did not have a family doctor. The girl said she did not trust him. The man asked why. The main character said the story was long, but the man just got more comfortable and said that anxiety is the source of many illnesses. Karina began by saying that she has never been the center of the world she belongs to. She was the younger sister supporting her brother, the heir to the family, the elder sister for whom sacrificing for the good of the younger ones is the norm, the one who cannot covet anything. One day, the girl asked her mother to sleep with her so that the loss of her beloved wallet would not be so bitter. But Dahlia refused because she was tired of comforting Ferdin. And breaking down, the girl shouted that she didn't want any more young men. The mother got angry at such words and hit Karina, calling her stupid. The main character was offended, and the woman kept yelling at the girl that she should be grateful to have been born healthy. When Karina said she was sick, they always treated her like a fraud. They said that compared to other children, her life was wonderful, and if she complained, they would send her to a town of beggars. The doctor, consoling her, took the girl's hands in his and told her that being with those who cause her pain is very difficult. And he began to tell his story, which he loved to tackle, but people around said this was not a man's business. His parents wanted him to become a knight and receive a title. While embroidering, no thought worried him. One day a man lost something dear and could not find it, and he gave up. Then he burned the embroidered items, like the things of the dead after a funeral rite. And a miracle occurred that he had already shown before. After this incident, he began to catch criminals, as if he had become a hero. He searched for children or pets that had run away from home. When about 20 years passed like this, his eyesight began to deteriorate, and the man could not do good embroidery. When he was diagnosed with an art sickness and told that if he continued embroidering, he might go blind, the man despaired and wanted to die. But he decided to travel and found his dream. The doctor began to treat people and did not want to call the art sickness incurable, so he couldn't leave the girl in the dark. Karina said she understood his feelings, and the man continued and pointed out that it is good that the girl is far from home because she has left the old borders, and it is time to create new memories and connections. The doctor remembered that Karina had not yet finished her tale, and the girl continued. The main character was 17 years old when he appeared on the territory of her estate. Karina was walking in the garden as usual and bumped into him. He introduced himself as Noctin and said he would be her family doctor. That's how the girl's first love began. Meeting him was like the first spring arriving late. He was attentive and gentle. Karina felt someone's attention for the first time. The main character once asked what Nocturne was doing in the garden, and he said that the flowers were blooming in the garden, and he thought the girl would like it. The main character thought the young man would give her a flower, but Abelia appeared, and all his attention focused on her. One day, an unpleasant incident occurred in the library. Leah was bored and wanted to play outside, and Karina tried to explain to her sister that she should be patient until she recovered. But suddenly the girl pushed the ladder away from the closet, and miscalculating, the closet almost fell on her. However, the girl got under the closet, and Noctin saw everything and ran towards Abel and Elsa to make sure nothing hurt her. When trying to get up, Karina said she was fine, which caught the young man's attention. He started yelling at the main character, telling her that Leah, unlike her, was weak. Fortunately, the cabinet fell on Karina and not on the girl. These words were a heavy blow to the girl. During the cabinet fall, the main protagonist twisted her leg, but this pain could not compare to what was happening in her soul. Karina asked if Noctin liked Abelia. The young man said that wasn't the point, but if something dangerous happened to Lee, he would definitely stop it. He left the library, holding Abelia in his arms, and the main character sat and waited for him to come get her, but no one came. Upon hearing the story, the man remembered how he warned the student not to accept patients similar to his sister, and told him to treat everyone impartially. Karina then realized that to the doctor, she was nobody. For him and for his parents, Abelia came first, and if he had been the first to find out about the protagonist's illness, he would not have told everything frankly. because it would surprise Abelia. Million had a feeling that Karina wanted to say something, and it would have been better if she had been more open with him. Passing by the girl's door, the man overheard her conversation with the doctor. Although it was not in his rules to eavesdrop, at the end of the story, Million was as angry as a swarm of wasps, because the family's attitude towards her was scandalous. Now he understood the smile she had given him during his illness, the way she got excited when they went to the market. All this is because a high wall has been built around her. Million remembered the girl's wish to visit the market again and decided to listen to her. Karina sat in her room late at night and drew a demonic beast. The main character just has to color it in, but after adding color, the girl realized that something was missing. She wanted to help the Duke. After all, it was just one more thing to add to the death list. Karina noticed that she was almost running out of materials. She wanted to ask the man to buy her some, but changed her mind because she is, after all, the Count's daughter. Passing by the nightstand, the girl focused her attention on Caront. But today it felt different, colder, as if it were magical. Karina and the Duke were going to the fair, and the main character told the man that she could go by herself. But Million objected and said that due to yesterday's incident, she couldn't look around properly and pick up winter clothes. The Duke also noticed that the girl did not get up at dawn today and did not feel his gaze during training. Embarrassed, Karina said she was drawing, and that's why she went to bed late. Million asked if his girlfriend had enough materials for her work, to which she jumped up and said she had pencils. The man said that in the north, it is difficult to obtain high-end products and professionals like those the girl uses. Karina didn't even use such quality materials at home, because if she bought high-quality materials, her father would find out. The Duke asked how she felt and warned her that if she was tired, they would return home immediately. And he noticed that Karina was lucky, because a doctor who knew the art sickness well had come to see her. And it seemed that the man's friend would also come soon. Karina asked who this friend was. Million replied that he was Carlos's head of the family, interested in finding qualified specialists, and added that he sent a drawing of a girl and ordered the servant who approached them to bring them winter clothes. The girl said it was a shame to send such low-level work, especially without her permission. As if they had read her personal diary, the Duke didn't think twice and apologized to his fiancée. Karina and the Duke were greeted by a beautiful redhead woman. Million introduced her as the owner of the chiffon boutique, and her name is Arya. The main character was happy to meet such a kind woman and asked to call her simply Karina. The Duke explained that they needed several casual outfits and comfortable clothes for work, but the girl said that was too much for her. But without listening to her, the man ordered to bring all the most expensive things that could be used for drawing. And Karina said she didn't need so many clothes, but Million invited her to choose whatever she wanted. While trying things on, the main character realized that the Duke could also be annoying. After all, she won't be able to wear these clothes for long. The girl didn't know what to do. Karina was tormented by the choice. She was asked to select her favorite outfits. Of course, this is not the first time the girl has visited the boutique, but they didn't speak to her with such tact. Million, concerned, placed his hand on the girl's forehead, to which she responded with a sigh of relief. She apologized for such a reaction and said that the man's hand was simply very refreshing. The Duke offered to go back home if she got worse, but Karina said she was simply tired and couldn't choose, because all the things were beautiful. The main character walked sulkily through the market, but Million couldn't understand what the problem was, because such purchases are not a problem for him. Karina said she didn't need so many things and stated sheepishly that it was the first time she had been offered to buy them all. The Duke suggested that this should be considered an apology for sending a drawing to Duke Carlos without permission. Looking at him, the girl thought about how good he was and decided that she needed to thank him somehow. The protagonist was daydreaming, and the man had to pull her out of her dream world. Million said they would go to the shop that Arya recommended and immediately go home. Karina took the Duke by the hand and hurried him so as not to be late. They entered through the door. The girl realized it was an artist's shop when she smelled the paint, and Million sadly noticed that his fiancée let go of his hand as soon as they arrived. The salesperson, an elderly man, noticed that the couple did not look like the people who usually looked at his shop, and he asked what had brought them here. Karina asked him to show her materials for creativity, but the man began to scare them away, saying that there were no high-quality materials here that would attract ladies. The girl said that paints and a flat brush would be enough for her. The salesperson asked Karina to show her hand. Examining it, I realized that the main character was drawing and apologized for his behavior. He just thought that Mrs. Rika came here for fun. The man said everything was for sale in the shop and offered to look around. When Karina left, the salesman apologized to the Duke and told him that he did not want to offend his chosen one. Million said they don't have that kind of relationship. The Duke told him to collect everything the girl would need in the workshop and asked the man if he was an artist. The salesman replied that yes, but that he did not paint due to illness. One day his fingers lost sensitivity, and hardening stopped moving. The man tried to draw with his left hand, but gradually it began to turn to stone. But after moving north, the pain disappeared, and his hand warmed up. Million had a guess about the illness, but Karina ran up and said that she had chosen everything. The girl wanted to buy everything herself and took a little, but the Duke surprised her by telling the man to add what she had chosen to the agreed order. The main character did not understand what he meant, but Million made it clear that he wanted to make a workshop for the girl. Karina was surprised and said she didn't need it, but suddenly she fell ill and lost consciousness. The protagonist was hot and suffocating, as if she were on fire, and then she woke up. The Duke was standing next to her and said that she had accumulated fatigue, so her body couldn't handle it. The girl promised to go to bed early in the future. Million didn't believe her and asked if it was really due to lack of sleep. He noticed that the girl looked away and laughed when she was lying down. The protagonist, caught in a lie, asked the man to leave her, but the Duke refused to leave, saying that when he turns around, the girl always falls. Karina asked Million not to be so kind to her, because it would be difficult for him when they parted. Two soldiers were standing guard on the Duke's wall. One of them observed Duke Carlos's carriage through a telescope and ordered the gates to be opened. Karina barely got out of bed. Million didn't let her go out for 3 whole days. The girl continued making her drawing. After all, the Duke takes care of her, and she wants to take care of the man. Finally, the work is finished. However, Karina expected anything but this. The beast left the scene. The estate trembled, and the Duke went to the girl to check if everything was all right. And when he saw the beast, he immediately took his sword. But the main character tried to stop him and said that the demonic creature was good. Million noticed in shock that the color of Karina's eyes had changed. The girl tried to close them, embarrassed by them. But the Duke said they were very suitable for the main character. And, having guessed, he asked the girl if she had taken advantage of the miracle. He said he knew that every time she used it, the art sickness worsened, and he took the sword. But Karina covered her pet with herself. Million ordered to move away from it because it is dangerous. The girl asserted that this demonic beast is not dangerous. Million, so be it, agreed with her. The main character started apologizing and said she would pay the property repair costs. But the Duke said he didn't need anything from her and suggested taking Gerda out of the building first. Addressing the demonic beast, Million asked it to go after them. But taking only one step, the ground beneath Gerda broke. The girl promised to reimburse him for everything, but the Duke, as usual, refused. Million and Karina carry the creature outside. The girl tells Million he should be calmer and strokes Gerda. Million notices that even expert knights are afraid of the monster and wonders why Karina is not afraid of it at all. To which Karina replies that in the whole world Gerda understands her better than anyone. Million asks why, of all possible monsters, Gert was chosen. The girl admits she wanted to help Million discover the monster's weak points. The boy was perplexed that Karina was talking about this as if it were obvious. Million, sighing, says he didn't ask Karina for help. He tells her that Karina doesn't need to sacrifice herself for others, to which she interrupts him, and tells him that she only does it for him. Million was extremely surprised by such an unexpected answer. Karina asks if Million would hug her if she helped him, and the attacks ended. Karina thinks that if at the end of her life she could take Million's warmth, she would die with a smile, and without regrets. Karina, realizing how her words sounded, got embarrassed and tried to justify herself. However, Million agreed, but said that the incident with the monster would not happen again, and that he didn't need Karina's help. Karina agrees and says she will not help anymore if Million doesn't like it. Million also wanted to start making excuses because Karina misunderstood his words. Suddenly, the butler approached them and announced that Furial Carlos had arrived. Million, along with Karina, enters the office, where Furial was already waiting for him. Carlos immediately introduced himself to Karina, brightening her with his smile. Karina silently noted his beauty and was about to introduce herself in response. shaking his hand, but Million intercepted the handshake, after which a tense atmosphere arose among everyone in the room. To clear things up, Million suggests that the two sit down and talk. Furial says that this time, he will forget such an incident thanks to Karina. The three began to discuss the girl's creation of a huge monster. Carlos wondered why the monster, to which Karina replied that she wanted to know the monster's weaknesses, and that she was afraid of not being useful in an attack. Carlos decided that she did it for Million, and asked if this monster had disappeared. Farial said he would not believe in the miracle of Karina's creativity until he saw it himself. When asked to explain, Carlos said that this is the rarest kind of miracle, and powerful, a gift that allows you to create anything, regardless of whether it exists in reality, even if it were a living person. Upon meeting Karina, Carlos became convinced that she was dying from her illness. After that, he remembered that he had a letter he needed to deliver to Karina. A letter from her father, Count Leopold. Farial said he received it when he went to the Count to report Karina's illness. Karina became seriously alarmed by this. Bad memories returned to her, but Million brought her back to reality, calming her and telling her that he was by her side. Million added that he could throw Carlos out the door. Farial decided that he had accepted a useless assignment and apologized to Karina. In the letter, her father wrote about what he had done and how it could affect his family. Karina was not surprised that her father was more concerned about the confinement than about her. Her father blamed her for her sister's deterioration. Until recently, her father did not believe the words about Karina's illness. Karina rushed to burn the letter in the fireplace. The boys were worried if Karina was okay, because her behavior seemed strange to them. With a smile, Karina asked if it was possible to get rid of him or if he was in a hurry. In response to her question, she received the answer that this is not important. Suddenly, Karina felt a sharp, strong pain in her heart. Million again told her to calm down and asked what had happened to her. Carlos realized that Karina's creations were closely related to her, and that it was better to see Gert. Million and Karina quickly ran to the creature. Gert became furious, and an order was given to kill her immediately. Karina wanted to stop them, but Million prevented her, telling her to move away because it was dangerous there. Karina tried to say that she had a way to calm the creature, but Million interrupted her and asked the guard what happened here. Previously, the monster was calm, which surprised the guards. Then one of them suggested using this to discover the monster's weak points. Million didn't like this because he said to leave the creature alone, after which he apologized to Karina, saying it was his mistake, but she said everything was fine and that she would sort everything out. This whole scene was observed by Furial, who seemed to have completely forgotten about him. Carlos said that the creature created by Karina could be dealt with without bloodshed. Million ordered everyone to move away from Gerda. Before leaving, Million whispered something in Karina's ear, after which he ordered everyone to be ready. And he left. Here Farial approached the girl with a question. The boy was interested in how quickly the creatures created by Karina disappeared. The girl said that in just a few hours or a day at most, which couldn't help but make me happy, because it meant it wouldn't be difficult to get rid of him. Karina approached Gerda and told her not to be afraid and that she needed to calm down. And Gerda's burning calmed down. She calmed down. It's time for Karina to take stock. During this time, kind people appeared in her life who could appreciate her abilities without comparing her to someone else. A man appeared who greatly appreciates her drawings. She no longer needs to hide her pain because now she has someone to share it with calmly. Now the girl feels that she deserves love. Karina was so busy writing the letter that she didn't even notice Million calling her. Looking at her tenderly, he asked if she had finished cleaning up. Million replied that he was almost finished and asked if what she was writing was a letter in response to her father. The girl says that her parents will definitely be angry with her, to which Million replies that he needs to let them know that she is not to blame for anything. After all, it is the parents who must take responsibility, and their responsibility does not end with material wealth. Million finishes by saying that if anyone scolds Karina, he will be on her side, for which she thanks him. The boy gets a little embarrassed and asks Karina if she has a couple of minutes. The girl agrees, and upon arriving at the location, she is pleasantly surprised. Million prepared an art workshop for her. The workshop was luxurious, even better than her room in her own house. For Karina, it was something more valuable than a gift she had ever received. But although it was just a gift, Karina still felt obligated to give something in return. However, Million said that Gerda, whom the girl created earlier, was of great help to him. To this, Karina objected that Gerda brought a lot of destruction and hurt many. But she was grateful that the boy relieved her of such responsibility. She thanked Million again for the workshop, but sadly noted that only 6 months remained. The boy replied that Karina could stay here for a longer period, and even after returning to the county, she could come here and paint pictures. The girl refused because they agreed for only 1 year, and Million will have a new man, so she won't be able to come and go as she pleases. The boy wanted to object, say that she could come anytime, but the girl interrupted him, only thanking him for everything Million does for her. Without discussing, Million said that tomorrow the owner of the art store would visit them, and that if she needed anything she should let him know, but for now Million had to leave. Million recalled Karina's words about only 6 months remaining. This engagement was only forced for the two of them, but he really plans to leave the estate exactly on time. But now is not the time to conquer a girl with her condition. But then Million realized that all his thoughts were filled only with Karina, which confused him. Carlos came out to meet him and asked what he was thinking about that made his face distort so much. It turned out that Furial came here for Karina. The man was worried about her art sickness, so he wanted to check her condition personally, and Million allowed it because Carlos knew much more about the illness than he did. After Furial said he would take good care of Karina, the boy left for business. At that moment, Karina also couldn't get the words out of her head and mentally made up names for them. In fact, she is very happy to hear those words from Million. Her thoughts were interrupted when Farial knocked on the door. Upon entering, the man asked about her condition. Karina replied that she felt fine and thanked him for his help with Gerda. Carlos said that Winston told him about Karina's illness, and now he would like to talk to the girl about it. Karina agreed to the conversation and invited him to sit down. Karina was tense throughout the conversation. She asked not to tell anyone that she didn't have much time left. But then Farial admitted that Winston was not the first person from whom he learned about the illness. Moreover, he immediately realized that Karina suffered from the art sickness. When the girl asked him how he understood this, Carlos talked about the ancient records left by his family. His family has been financing artists for a long time, so they have encountered people with this illness more than once. But Karina herself didn't know about it 6 months ago. But Furial said that this is normal, because the miracle of creation is extremely rare. Moreover, her abilities were very close and almost divine. Karina doubted his words, but the man said that an ordinary creature could not live a whole day. Moreover, there is no record that creations of such large sizes ever existed. Karina didn't even suspect that her abilities were so amazing. After which the girl asked if all owners of the miracle would give their lives in return. Carlos said that none lived longer than 30 years. They had no personal attachments. There were only paintings in their lives. And the more they painted them, the faster they lost their minds, using their flesh and blood as consumables. What Karina heard was extremely alarming. Farial said he wanted to help her and asked her to tell him everything, without hiding anything. He also asked to be notified if the girl felt any of the listed symptoms. Carlos continued describing the symptoms, saying that, additionally, people become more sensitive and emotional and begin to draw tirelessly, as if under hypnosis. Other accounts mention that patients describe their creations as the only ones that understand them, and they believe that this is the only thing they have in life. Karina confirmed all the symptoms Carlos described, which astonished him. She really became more emotional. She painted tirelessly, and her creations seemed to understand her better than anyone. Farial hurried to say that he was not going to reproach her, but warned that if she keeps running away, it will be difficult for her. And if she puts her negative emotions into the pictures, she will regret it later. Carlos asked if Karina planned to stop painting now, to which she replied negatively, adding that this is the only thing she has. The man said he understood her because he poured his emotions into music, just as Karina does into paintings. Since childhood, he liked to play the flute, so his parents even watched him. After that, he learned to avoid surveillance, because it is not so easy to give up something that brings him so much pleasure. After this short story, he asked if he could ask Karina for a favor. He would like to look at her paintings. To be more precise, he wanted to see how the girl uses her abilities. Karina thought about it because she only wanted to send a letter, so maybe she should draw a door leading there. The girl wanted to draw quite quickly, so I decided to do it. Even without a sketch, Karina set to work tracing elegant lines on the canvas. Ferial, seeing this, couldn't take his eyes off her. He was simply delighted with her work. Karina's talent seemed truly enchanting and magnificent to him. The man was overwhelmed by feelings he didn't know how to express. Karina felt a heaviness in her chest, but continued working because she needed to finish drawing a little more. Carlos's warm and calm flute playing reached her ears. It made the heaviness in my chest disappear, as if it had never existed. Is this really the healing power that the Carlos family possesses? Karina, upon finishing the painting, wanted to praise Ferial's melody, but he interrupted her, saying that, "I think I simply fell in love with her." Karina didn't seem to understand. But then Carlos abruptly asked her what she thought of the music. The girl replied that the melody was really great, and Ferial said he was inspired by the way she draws, and tried to improvise the melody. This surprised and delighted Karina. The man praised the girl's work and asked if her miracle needed some time to activate. Karina replied that it activates immediately after completing the image. The guy asked if they could enter Leopold County through this door, because if so, then Karina had real divine power. Karina answered affirmatively and asked if he would go with her, to which she also received his consent. And so, they crossed the door and found themselves in Karina's room. Ferial noted that women usually have more luxurious rooms, to which he received the answer that his sister had precisely that room. Karina began to feel sad because of the fact that, due to her sister's eternal engagement, she could never make friends with anyone. But Ferial told her not to be sad because she has him. They know each other, they left the estate together. Doesn't that make them friends? Besides, he knows Karina's situation, so he could advise her. And both are artists, so they can understand each other easily, and if they have free time, walk together. But due to lack of experience, the girl didn't even know what her friends should do. However, for the boy this was not a problem at all. So since they were friends, Karina asked Carlos a question. How does he know what other women's bathrooms are like? After all, you normally can't enter a room unless you are engaged. So he really has a fiancé. But it turned out that Ferial only saw them at tea parties and doesn't have a girlfriend. But still, they are here to leave a letter, and judging by the dust everywhere, they don't actually enter the room, so it's unknown when the letter will be discovered. She would like to do this as quietly as possible, but there are many servants walking around here, and Carlos offered to help her, asking only that she open the window a little and cover her ears. The servants talked about the oppressive atmosphere that reigned on the estate. At lunchtime, the owner barely speaks to his wife. Infric doesn't come home. Abelia is downcast and barely eats, and Ferial is constantly on her thoughts. Suddenly, the maids heard a melody that surprisingly came from Karina's open window. Suddenly, the girls wanted to sleep. A few seconds later, Carlos's music made everyone who heard it fall asleep. Now Karina could meet the person she missed, but she doesn't have him. Ferial supposed the letter was a farewell letter, and Karina confirmed it by saying that in the letter, she asked the family to pretend she didn't exist. After all, the father won't believe she was sick until he sees her lifeless body, and then he will regret it. Walking down the hall, they saw Abelia sleeping. Fortunately, Abelia looked healthy. Karina asked Carlos to take her sister to bed. The girl admired her sleeping sister. Ferial drew attention to the drawings that were on the nightstand next to the bed, but the girl said it was time for them to leave. Before leaving, Carlos asked about her relationship with her family. Karina replied that, for her, everything was not so bad. In the eyes of other people, they certainly look like a happy family. But nobody knows that all this is only thanks to someone's sacrifice. And Karina could not stay here, so at least she wanted to live the remaining time for herself. And for herself, to leave her creations in this world, so that she would be remembered not as someone's sister or daughter, but as the artist Karina, so that she has to forget everything related to this place. Count Leopold regained consciousness and asked the servants what had happened on the estate. Thus he learned that for some reason, everyone on the estate fell asleep at the same time. They had no other information. Suddenly, Karina's father noted a letter on the table. It was strange because no letter arrived today. The handwriting on the letter to the count seemed familiar to him, but he didn't remember whose it was. It was really his daughter Karina. His letter was full of strength, determination, and composure, so that he might think Karina might be right. He always told Karina that she would not become someone in this family. She believes that she diligently followed his words, so now she asks her father to return the favor. Don't tarnish her name anymore. She will be famous in the future. Everything she had endured for so long was finally over. Now she feels the excitement and fear of an unknown love. Now she has a world where the main ones are not Abelia, Ferdin, or Infric, but only her. She never felt safe on the estate. The Count became furious at this letter. He knew his father would be furious about the letter and what he didn't say before. But he really said something. It is true that since childhood she was a girl who never cried. She didn't stay silent, she was just tired of talking. Leopold ordered immediate contact with the Count in the north, because Karina must return immediately. He didn't care that the road was closed because, in his opinion, those words simply couldn't belong to Karina. The butler suggested that Karina might actually be sick. The Count asked if the man wanted to anger him more, but the butler continued. A few months ago, disgusting sounds were heard coming from Lady Karina's room. Moreover, the butler told the Count about it, but he was always busy with urgent matters. And he told him to repeat it later. And the older lady said that Karina is already an adult and can take care of this herself. The Count ordered paper for letters to be brought to him, while Abelia woke up and headed towards her father. Leopold said that when Karina returns, he will be obliged to talk to her. But Abelia, who entered the room, said that her sister would not return with her. In a dream, Karina said goodbye to her sister. At night, Karina recalled and thought about the whole day. Still, she spent most of her time in the mansion with her sister and won't be able to forget her so easily. Initially, Karina wanted to deliver the letter using another of her creations. But now she ordered him to get rid of the wallet, a reminder of the past. Of her sister, Karina, Ferial, and Million are sitting having tea. However, Million doesn't quite understand what Carlos forgot here. But Karina said she invited him because they somehow needed to celebrate the day they became friends, and she thought Million wouldn't mind. The man seemed displeased, although he said everything was fine. Million asked what the plans for today were, and Ferial said that today he and Karina have plans to work together. Million said he didn't ask Ferial, to which he replied that Million didn't ask anyone in particular. Suddenly, Karina burst out laughing. The boys looked at her surprised and asked what made her laugh so much. She replied that the two of them were very good friends. Million asked if they were that funny. The girl replied that this was not the case and that she felt fine now. Conversing calmly, laughing, and eating, the person with whom she spends such insignificant moments is undoubtedly Million. As long as Karina is happy, nothing else matters. But if she doesn't feel well, she will have to go rest. Million had to leave, so Karina wished him a good trip. This made the boy feel a little embarrassed. Karina really didn't want Million to leave, but she couldn't object, because the war with the monsters is a very important matter. But the boy said he would have to wait a little, and that this time he would bring her a better Caront. The girl thanked him, saying that with him she could feel calmer. Ferial had been watching their sweet conversation this whole time. They talk very cheerfully, but they are not going to break the engagement. The friends continued drinking. Suddenly, Karina felt unwell. The girl's hands were trembling, so she said she would go to her room to rest. Million wanted to accompany her, but she refused. So Million and Ferial were left alone. Carlos noticed that Karina seemed very worried. Without answering anything, Million only asked when the man was leaving. Ferial replied with a question about whether it was too much to ask such a thing from a friend who came here by invitation. But he received the answer that Carlos came here only for the owner of the paintings. Their conversation suddenly became more serious when it came to the severity of Karina's illness. Carlos replied jokingly that he didn't know, to which Emilian said that now was not the time for jokes. Ferial recalled a recent conversation with a girl, a conversation in which Karina asked Ferial to keep this place a secret from Million. So, Carlos replied that Karina wouldn't want to tell Million about her condition, which surprised the latter. Ferial expected the boy to understand and not be able to say more. But now he asked Million what Caront was, and he found out that it was a special mineral that rarely appears when you kill a monster. There is an ancient belief that if you deceive a sick person, they will feel better. Carlos was surprised that Million believed in superstitions, after which Million said that the belief still exists that if you point a finger at a person, they will fall, and he offered to demonstrate. Ferial quickly walked away. Then Million called him and asked what they suddenly decided to learn, he and Karina. But Ferial replied that it was a secret, after which he quickly disappeared. Karina doesn't feel well. The maid notices and offers to call the doctor, but Karina says everything is fine, and she simply stumbled. The maid objected because the owner said to call the doctor immediately, even if Karina's pain was insignificant. Karina was grateful for this and said she would call Dr. Winston later. At the reception, Winston said that the girl's illness was not progressing rapidly, but compared to the last time, her condition had significantly worsened. This did not surprise Karina at all. She already knew it. The girl asked if she would vomit as often now because she didn't want Million to see that part of her. Winston replied that vomiting would continue because she was now in a state where she would have to be as careful as possible in everything. But the most important thing of all is her desire to live. And now Karina didn't expect death like before. She wanted to enjoy every moment of her life, show her family what kind of person she was, and create happy memories for Million. Winston suggested that Karina had no place, which would hurt more than others. But above all, the girl's heart ached, so much so that sometimes she wanted it to burst. Karina apologized for being a useless burden to Million and Winston, but Winston told her not to say that, because it was his duty to save people. The girl replied that Winston was absolutely right. Suddenly, Ferial appeared at the door, saying there was no need to apologize to him. He explained that he wanted to ask a question, but accidentally overheard their conversation. Winston let them go and said he still had work to do. Karina thanked him for the visit, to which he told her to stay in bed. He also told her not to give up because that would help her live longer. Karina thanked him again. Now she regrets those thoughts. She regrets not leaving her old world sooner. After that, she asked what Ferial wanted to know. Carlos said that her miracle was completely different from the others, and her illness is developing at an abnormal rate. Other creators put their whole soul into their paintings and still live longer. That's why he wanted to ask. He knows the prohibitions that exist when creating a miracle, but it turned out that Karina didn't know anything about them. But all miracle owners should know them. This wouldn't have happened if Karina hadn't been deprived of her parents' love. Ferial decided to explain the art sickness to Karina. In fact, the sickness is the price for previously performed miracles, and especially for those that cross the line. Normally, all miracles have a limit, but people who don't have one are said to suffer from art sickness. And the creator, subject to art sickness, must not violate the prohibitions. First, do not violate the laws of nature. Do not resurrect the dead. Do not turn back time. Secondly, people cannot be created. Lastly, a miracle is not for killing. If you violate the prohibitions, you will have to lose part of your body or even die. For Karina, becoming disabled meant losing the opportunity to draw. And she really didn't want that. Ferial asked if Karina had tried to create any of the things he listed earlier, and Karina replied negatively. Carlos accepted this answer, because if she broke the prohibitions, she simply wouldn't be able to survive. But he still couldn't understand why the girl had to pay that price, because she didn't paint many paintings. There are people who painted more paintings, but have passed the threshold of 30 years. Ferial really believes that if the reason is discovered, Karina may recover. But there is really no cure for the sickness, but perhaps by knowing the cause. The progression of the illness can be slowed down. Carlos's method was to stop just before finishing the painting. Then it wouldn't be considered finished, and the miracle couldn't work. And if Karina gives him the unfinished painting, he will make her a famous artist. The girl gladly accepted this wonderful proposal. Now Karina can only move forward, and her friends will accompany her until the end. Late at night, Karina sat on the balcony waiting for Million, who was very late. But no, now is not the time to worry. Now she needs to write a list of things she wants to do. For example, give a gift to her loved one, prepare lunch for him, give him a hug. The thought of kissing him embarrassed Karina greatly. This whole scene was observed by Million, who was returning, whose knock the girl didn't hear. The boy was surprised, thinking how cute Karina is. But then I realized that I thought the same as Ferial. Just thinking about the kiss made the girl's temperature rise. The man went out onto her balcony and asked if something was bothering her at that moment. Karina didn't answer anything, but asked if he had finished all his business already. Million needed to go even further, because before the campaign, he needed to recognize everything well. The boy reminded Karina of the need to rest and the importance of seeking help if she doesn't feel well. The girl wished him to be careful on the road. Now they will see each other only in 2 days, and Karina will be waiting for him. Million rode through the winter forest. He tried to drive as fast as possible to arrive on time for lunch, as he promised Karina. So he didn't care that the nights were behind him. The group stopped for a short break. The northern lands belong to monsters that starve in the summer and go crazy in the winter. Million's ancestor was the hero who drove the monsters out of the world, and now it is his turn to protect the people. Karina was waiting for Million, although he was supposed to arrive tomorrow. Winston, who arrived, noticed that during this time the girl had changed a lot. Now she looks much happier than before, and that makes me happy. In fact, Karina even gained strength to do what she couldn't do before, for example, writing a letter to the county. She wanted to send money from her future paintings to her parents to show them that they were no longer connected by anything. She regrets every second of the past and no longer wants to be associated with it. Now she lives looking only forward. Million announces that tomorrow at dawn, they will go even deeper into the forest. Their first target is the Gerda. And besides, if one of the knights sees Carant, bring him the stone. It wasn't necessary to look for Gerda, because she found them herself. The monster screamed, thus calling the rest of the Gert. The monsters blocked their escape route. Million ordered to aim at the weak points he spoke of earlier. When suddenly one of those creatures appeared behind him, Karina was going to Million. But suddenly, the guards started shouting that a flock of Gert had appeared. Goretsky told Karina to stay in the carriage, and he himself went to check the situation. Karina suddenly felt as if she had had a heart attack. The guards shouted that the wall might not hold and would collapse. Then an idea occurred to the girl on how to buy time. The last thing she drew was Gerda. Now she only had to finish drawing her. But no, it wasn't enough. Karina's gaze fell upon the knife. The Gerda advances. We must resist at all costs. There was a crash bang where Gerda appeared. Fortunately, it was Karina's Gerda. The girl asked her Gerda to keep the other Gerdas at bay until Million arrived. And the creature immediately rushed to fulfill its creator's order and devour other Gerts. The girl was in a hurry to stop Gerda and allowed the other Gert to escape. Million suddenly appeared. He wanted to protect Karina from the monster, but the girl rushed to stop him, saying it was her creation. But Karina's eye color didn't change, as usually happened after the miracle was performed. Ferial approached the couple, and now the three of them need to discuss what happened. Karina said the situation was difficult, and that it was necessary to keep the monster somehow until Million returned. She apologized for breaking her promise not to use force, but the boy said it wasn't Karina's fault. On the contrary, it is he who should apologize, because if he had hurried, this would not have happened. Carlos interrupted them by saying they looked good together, but returning to the topic of conversation. He asked if Karina could get rid of her Gerda the old-fashioned way. Karina replied that she had already tried several times, but it seemed to be beyond the girl's control. But fortunately, the monster is listening to her for now, and Gerda also promised not to misbehave. Karina guessed that this was because Gerda had eaten someone. The girl suddenly felt pain, and blood began to flow from her mouth. It was as if someone was squeezing her heart, as if wanting to crush it. Karina really didn't want to die like this. Million said he wouldn't let her die. Winston will come soon, just wait a little longer. Karina lost consciousness. Upon returning, Ferial quickly handed the girl over to Mila and Anukaran. Winston asked to examine Karina, and Carlos called Million outside to talk. Upon leaving, Million asked if this attack happened because of Gerda. Ferial replied that it was very possible, after which Million immediately wanted to kill the monster. The man was very angry because Karina was suffering, but he couldn't even do anything. But Carlos suggested there was a way. After Carant's action, Karina's breathing became calmer. So maybe this is the cure for the art sickness. And Gerda went out of control because it could eat a monster with a Carant inside. Now Million was determined to kill all the monsters to bring as much Carant as possible to Karina and test Ferial's hypothesis. The expected disappearance of Gerda never happened, and Karina's symptoms only worsened. She still spends her days drawing. This made her dreams less terrifying. Lost in her thoughts, Karina accidentally finished the painting, although she promised Ferial not to do it. The girl released the butterflies that appeared by the window, but Million, who was below, noticed her. There was definitely anger on his face. Someone knocked on the door. The door opened, and Million entered the room. Karina quickly started apologizing, saying she got too carried away by the process. The girl knows very well that they are worried about her. Million asked her not to be excessive. After all, he wants to be with Karina as long as possible. The pain caused by the art sickness cannot be drowned out by any medicine. This usually manifests through painful illusions. For this reason, the sleeping pills Karina takes had no effect, so there is no other way to relieve her pain. Ironically, it was in the north, which was poor in artists, that clues to cure the art sickness were found. Million was willing to help Ferial in his entire investigation. Carlos asked if he was worried about Karina, but Million asked not to ask the obvious. It seems that Million recently said how tired he was of his fiancée, to which Million replied sharply that he simply didn't like people dying before his eyes. Many days passed, but Gerda, created by Karina, never disappeared. Million couldn't be sure of anything, but Karina was very happy when he invited her to the next ball. At first, Karina bothered the man, so he thought that by breaking the engagement he would relieve himself of a great burden. But at what point did he start caring about her? His gaze was always directed at Karina, and every time he looks at her, he wants to kiss her. The last thought really confused the boy. Million wondered if something would have changed if they had talked the first time they met. Karina would be different, her current condition. And how are they now? Karina admired the views from the carriage window. The beauty of the royal lake truly amazed her. And I was surprised that, even though it was cold outside, there wasn't a single piece of ice on the lake. Million replied that this lake never freezes, but that they should bundle up well. The couple walked along the shore. Today Karina didn't even feel like drawing. Instead, she wanted to take a walk with Million. The boy asked if he should be glad that he was above her drawing and a priority, to which Karina agreed. The boy noticed that she really didn't seem to know anything about the north, so Million decided to tell her the story of the mountain range. They say that behind the ridge begins paradise or the devil's lands, according to other sources. Dragons live behind it, but rumors about the latter were extremely exaggerated. If such a place exists, it must be very picturesque, but in reality, there are only rugged rocks there. In any case, it was a very beautiful story. Million would like to look at the world through Karina's eyes at least once in his life. But the girl didn't understand what was interesting about it. But still, Million thought the view was beautiful. Suddenly, Karina remembered that she had a gift for her boyfriend. It was a small drawing of medicine. A medicine that can cure any wound, but which will not resurrect the half-dead or one whose body has been torn apart. Such a medicine does not exist, so the girl created it herself. But for it to work, Karina had to finish the drawing. Then it would turn liquid and be ready for use. But Million said he didn't need the medicine, that it would harm her. Million doesn't want Karina to suffer. On the contrary, he wants to see her smile. But in any case, he is grateful to her. But what good is it if the girl gets hurt? Karina hurried to say that creating inanimate beings barely consumes her strength. She knows that Million is strong, but she just wanted to be prepared for any situation. Million warned that such a drug could attract money-hungry people, which could endanger her. The man, of course, promised to keep it secret, but if rumors reach the soldiers, they would spread quickly. How will Karina drink in this case? The girl admitted that she hadn't thought about it. However, she had no fear next to the boy. Karina said she understands that Million is getting tired of her, but the boy objected, saying that she was not a burden to him, that he won't get tired, and she can bother him as much as she wants. And under no circumstances will he dare to hate her. Of course, at first it even irritated Million. He is not the type of person interested in caring, especially caring for people. But to everyone's surprise, Karina turned out to be an exception to the rule. He became interested in what this girl liked, what amused her, and why she showed sincerity of emotions. And she, in turn, worries if he is suffering somewhere, and she is surprised that someone can make her worry so much. It seemed that now he almost understood and could no longer deny it. Million asked if she liked him, to which the girl replied that there was never a moment when she didn't like him. A butterfly flying by distracted them, and Karina said that next time she would like to draw this place. Karina asked if Fariel was really not going to the ball. Carlos replied that he could attend the ball next time, but that now he wanted to show his work to the world as quickly as possible. Through Karina's magic door, Fariel headed to the capital. The girl wished him a good trip. Karina felt almost nothing when using the door. And when she was younger, when a miracle was created, she immediately felt a response. And she doesn't like that her feelings are slowly becoming numb. Moreover, she used to draw to forget her sorrows. Therefore, she couldn't even imagine any prohibitions in creativity. Anticipating the ball, Karina decided to draw a little more. But the hand holding the brush began to shake so violently that the girl dropped the brush. She tried to ignore the strange feeling in her hand. First, she needs to prepare for the ball. Karina tried to calm herself, saying everything would be fine. She had 4 more months left. Nothing would happen right now. Maybe she would feel better if she drew for fun. Previously, during attacks, the pain disappeared if a miracle was created. Million was standing at the foot of the stairs when he noticed Karina on them. The girl clearly didn't expect to see him here, as if he had taken her by surprise. The boy immediately, with all tenderness, lifted her in his strong arms into the air. He slowly decided to carry her to her room. Karina felt embarrassed by what happened, so she began to apologize to the young man sitting in front of her. Million reminded her that she didn't need to hide her suffering in front of him. Karina didn't understand how he so quickly understood what her family couldn't grasp in 20 years of living together. Knowing this made it even more painful. The man tried to calm her and suggested calling Winston, but Karina replied that she was fine, and it was too obvious a lie. Million repeated that she didn't need to restrain herself in front of him. The girl wondered if the boy would be so sensitive if she weren't sick. If only they had married as planned and lived like a normal married couple. Karina thanked Million. Now she really felt much better. It's just that now the boy will have to change his tear-stained clothes because he can't go to the ball like that. But today is only the eve of the ball, so maybe Karina should rest today. It was the first time the girl heard the expression vestibule, reception hall. Million said that this culture only exists in the north, where the day before the ball people gather and drink in an informal atmosphere. And Karina was very grateful that the man explained everything she didn't know. Million asked her to wait for him for a while she rested. The girl wondered if she wasn't sick. He would look at her with love and not with pity. No, you can't be wrong. Million only cares because she is sick. Million told the butler that Karina was sick, so let him celebrate the eve today and postpone the ball until tomorrow. But the man didn't understand what kind of threshold that was. It turned out that Million had invented it especially for Karina, so he simply said that the guests should drink, eat and do whatever they wanted, and that the ball would take place tomorrow. The butler told the guests that the planned reception was postponed until tomorrow, and that today they could have a good time. Baron Krembo was not very happy with this news, and Viscountess Ariel noticed that Million constantly asks to end the banquet early. The two found Million quite boring, and Count Leonhard didn't mind enjoying a drink today without rushing anywhere. Million returned to Karina and asked how she felt. Fortunately, the girl felt better. The boy asked if she could sit next to him. Karina didn't mind, but she thought he would sit on a chair and not literally next to her. Million said he would give her all the Karens now, and he was going to say the same to today's guests. Karina asked why he was so kind to her, and Million replied that he just wanted her to be safe. He wanted to see her paint her pictures without worries. Karina had an important request that she could no longer keep to herself. She asked him if she could accompany him on the next trip, hoping he would agree to take her with him. This request surprised Million, and he didn't immediately find what to answer. Since he did not expect such a desire from her, the trip and return home last 1 or even 2 months. But this is almost all the time Karina has left, and she would like to spend it with her beloved. The girl promised she wouldn't be in the way and would stay behind, but Million refused because it was too dangerous. And if the girl wanted to travel, they could do it after his return. In the place they are going, it is impossible to guarantee safety, even for the nights. But Karina said this is not a problem, because she only wants to spend as much time as possible with the boy. Realizing what she had just said, Karina felt very embarrassed. The girl quickly tried to justify herself by saying she was bored spending every day at home, and that it would be even worse if she were alone. And she can also help, at least a little. Million said that her help is already enough. But since she says so, he will think about it. This was enough for Karina. But first, if she feels well, it's time to go to bed. But the girl didn't want him to leave. Taking his hand, she wanted to keep the boy with her at least a little longer. Million turned to her and told her that she arouses him. He kissed her carefully. Both enjoyed the long-awaited moment, and both were incredibly embarrassed. But does he like her at least a little, or is it just sympathy? She always liked it when Million responded to her touch when he stroked her hair. She was too trusting until this moment. After all, Million is also a person, whether it's sympathy or love. Karina called Million an affectionate person, and there isn't a shred of lie in his words. But he cannot feel anything special for her. It's all simply out of sympathy for a dying person. Million asked what she had just said. Karina said it was the first time she had been comforted like that, but that it made her feel better. The boy asked her again about her gratitude for the comfort. It was an impulsive act. For the first time, he didn't realize he had lost his mind. One day, he got used to involuntarily running his hands through her hair. He was so used to her presence that now, he couldn't imagine his days without her by his side. And the usual one is not attentive enough to kiss for comfort. Therefore, Million thought that Karina understood everything. He agreed with Karina's option about comfort, if it would be easier for her. But it's good that he knows about her lack of talent for acting. After all, now she looks like an abandoned puppy. The girl tried to avoid the conversation, saying she was tired and it was time to sleep. Million said she needed a break starting today. And if suddenly she got sick or needed help, he asked her to call him at any time. Without hesitation, the boy silently turned and left, leaving her alone with her thoughts and feelings. Million wasn't even angry. It would have been better if he had lost his temper. Then he would acknowledge the lie and could move on. But she has to stop being so selfish, or she will hurt Million. She liked the boy. Million does nothing, but Karina still feels a little uncomfortable. So the boy abruptly said that if she wanted to, she could go on the trip with him. She has Gerda, so she doesn't need protection. Karina offered to make more of her medicine, so there would be enough for the other nights. But Million, of course, did not give permission for that. And the boy also said that it is better for a girl not to use her life in exchange for miracles. The statement about life tensed Karina. She found out about her limited time. Million said he knew everything she talked about with Ferial, and he knows that her life as a creator could easily end. Fortunately for Karina, Carlos changed Million's information. The girl said that the boy seemed to get angry if someone died. Million didn't deny it, so she wanted to help him because he is her benefactor. But the boy said that she was also one of them, and he will get angry if Karina dies. That's why he asks her not to die. The request not to die was what she always wanted to hear. But upon hearing it, she truly felt a knot in her chest, depression. Million continued saying that if she survives the hike, she will be able to see the spring. And when spring comes, he will surely take her to the waterfall to show her its majestic beauty. Karina replied with a smile that she would look forward to this trip and yearn for the moment they would see the waterfall together. Together they will survive the summer, face the autumn, and live until next winter, enjoying every moment they spend together. The north stretches over enormous distances, and there really is something to see here. Majestic landscapes, endless forests and snow-covered expanses. Apparently, she will have to stay here for a long time, because circumstances dictate that her departure is postponed indefinitely. But she won't have time to capture it all. Million asked if Karina would feel uncomfortable if he said that none of this mattered to him, if he says she can stay here as long as she wants. And he was sincere, but Karina had to keep lying to Million, and she blamed herself a lot for it. Million said he could show her different places she could draw, for which the girl thanked him. She must lie to Million until she dies. Is there something she can do to alleviate the feelings arising from this responsibility? Ferial was responsible for placing Karina's paintings, and all these works will definitely be publicly exhibited so everyone can appreciate their beauty. There are only 3 paintings, but they create a strong effect of presence. Almost everyone in the capital has heard of the artist suffering from an artistic illness. And about her paintings, so many people would like to take a look at them. And Ferial kindly asked the servants to keep their mouths shut about the man in the rumors. When the exhibition ends, the paintings will be distributed around the world just like their creator. It's time for everyone to know about the artist Karina. Frick couldn't understand why there were so many people in the square. It turned out that the Carlos family is inaugurating a painting exhibition. They say that even the emperor is interested in it. Frick decided that in this case, he simply had to take a look. The Carlos family opened an auction where they offered several unpublished paintings. Everything was going as well as possible, and it seemed that nothing could alter this favorable turn of events. For Karina, not finishing the painting turned out to be much harder than she thought. But Ferial said that if she completed them, he would not take them to the exhibition. The girl was very grateful to him for all this. Rumors spread extremely fast. Freg went to his father's office and asked if he had heard about the rumors circulating in the capital. But the count didn't understand what his son was talking about, although they were written about in the newspapers. But the man didn't have time to read them. They even recall the state of Infrika's mother now, crying every day because Karina left the family. But in this case, these rumors should pique his interest even more. After all, there are now rumors in the capital about an unknown artist named Karina. The count suggested that they were most likely just namesakes, and that they actually had nothing in common. And this was possible because nowhere is the name Leopold mentioned, about whom Karina spoke in her letter. But does Infry really think this artist is his sister? Didn't Leopold say the same thing when Karina told Duke Carlos about her illness? And since his father doesn't understand what will happen if he continues to follow his tactics. In this case, he will never see Karina again in his life, nor even speak to her. In the letter, she didn't call herself Karina Leopold, but the artist Karina, and intends to leave her mark on people's memory precisely through her paintings, putting all her soul and talent into them. The Count asked if Duke Carlos was her godfather, but Duke Carlos remains silent and only mentions that he knows nothing. So the Count will really give up. But if it really is Karina, what should he do? The day of the Great Northern Ball has finally arrived. Million and Karina were in a hurry to present themselves to the guests. The boy assured her that the Northern Ball was not as formal as the one in the capital, but she was more worried that today was the first time she would meet the Northern aristocrats. Million asked the girl not to bother with this, because they were doing everything simply. But what was seen in the hall could clearly not be described by this word. They were greeted by Baron Krembo, who nodded cordially at the meeting. Emilian wondered since when Krembo dressed like this. Nevertheless, out of courtesy, he still praised his suit, although he wasn't truly impressed. And Krembo praised the pre-ball period, because you could drink as much as you wanted. Viscountess Irial asked indignantly who dared to cross that threshold. Neither the first nor the second helped with their comments, so Million tried to redeem himself by asking if Irial had a good time at the event. And she seemed to have drunk quite a bit since she started complaining. And then he asked if she had done what he asked her to do earlier, talking about forming an elite squad for the Jurda. The Viscountess called him petty because they had just met, and he was already talking about work. Karina, who had been silent all this time, took Million by the hand, and she said that she also wanted to meet them. The boy asked her if she was sure about her decision. And really, he is not enough for her. But Krembo got ahead of everyone by introducing himself to Karina. The girl introduced herself to him in response. Irial also introduced herself to Karina as Marin Irial. Karina apologized to Million because it was his fault she had to cross the threshold. Million said not to worry because he doesn't like drinking much, to which Krembo whispered that the guy was lying. And he hadn't blushed. Krembo invited Karina to accompany him and introduce her to the northern aristocracy, while Million was busy with official matters. The girl asked Million if he would mind, to which the boy said he didn't have such urgent matters. But after thinking, he remembered that he had forgotten something. This won't take him more than half an hour, so for now he can be with the Baron. Satisfied, Karina asked Million to return soon. But since there were no urgent matters really, Million didn't know where to go now. Krembo called the girl incredible. Million behaves like a puppy with her. Marin asked how Karina managed to earn his trust and tame his heart. Then Count Leonhard Shelley approached them, introduced himself, and said he was happy to meet Million's fiancé. But Karina hurried to inform that they haven't announced it yet, but they are going to call off the marriage contract soon. Krembo was surprised by this, because recently it was ordered that all found Karens be sent to the lands of Duke Million. Shelley was also surprised and said he was sure he gave this order for that reason. Karina said that the Karen was indeed being collected thanks to her, but she didn't understand what that expression meant. Irial explained to the girl that in the north, Karen is usually given to someone dear. Like a diamond. For example, you can ask your parents for support or share your thoughts with a trusted friend. But in the case of the opposite sex, it is usually given to the spouse. But Karina said that was impossible because they were going to break the engagement. She said she had an incurable disease and was told that Karen was associated with a cure for it. Therefore, everything comes down to this. And the reason for what is happening is precisely here. Ariel decided to leave the embarrassed girl alone, agreeing with her. Once the meeting was over, Krembo invited Karina to sit down. Leon Hart asked if Karina had settled in the north. Karina agreed and said that although the culture and way of life are different here, thanks to the friendly attitude, she was able to get used to it quickly. Marin said that she always felt that the atmosphere in other territories was more tense. Shilai said that although her words might seem impolite, she has known Million for a long time. And today, he didn't look like a man about to break off his engagement. It is clear that Million cares a lot about her. And Karina would be delighted to accept his feelings and admit hers. But she is sick and doesn't want to hurt Million. Leahart noticed that their conversation topic was already 30 minutes behind schedule. After these words, Million suddenly appeared and asked Karina if something had happened to her. But she replied that she just wanted to get some fresh air. The boy, smiling, said they would leave their friends for a while. Stepping out onto the terrace, Million asked if she had fun while he was away. And Karina said she was told many interesting and kind stories. Million was worried about her flushed face. Then the girl said it was all his fault. After all, everyone else perfectly understood that his gaze towards her was always special and different from the way he looked at others. So now she had a strong desire to apologize to him and try to smooth over the awkwardness that had arisen between them. Apologize for the fact that she would soon have to leave him and try to explain her reasons to him, leaving fewer unspoken things between them. And perhaps it would have been better for everyone if he had never loved her. And when spring finally arrives, she will leave this place behind and venture into the unknown. Karina is not used to feeling true love and sincere affection, and it will be enough for her if everything remains as it is now, without unnecessary changes or shifts. But Karina didn't know how to lie at all. The truth was visible in her eyes. And Million perfectly saw that she loved him too. Karina must have been tired today, so he kissed her lightly on the forehead. Then Million suggested postponing the conversation until tomorrow, but now he needed to say goodbye to the guests. Million returned alone to the guests. Krembo asked him where Karina was. The boy said Karina was tired, so she left first. Leonhardt said he thought she was from a noble family, which Million confirmed, but he added that due to circumstances, she had cut off contact with them. Shilai asked what kind of incurable disease Karina suffered from. Million replied that with this illness, a person loses something if they continue conducting business. But he couldn't fully explain this illness. Irial asked if there was any place where more people knew about the illness. Krembo said he could ask a couple of people with the same condition. This immediately caught Million's attention and sparked his genuine interest. And claiming he urgently needed to leave for business, he quickly left the place without giving anyone a chance to ask questions. Marin asked what they should do now with the meeting. The Baron observed that it was the first time the party had been so interesting, and Leonhardt was glad that Million finally started resembling his peers.